9715.
Well, hello again. Welcome to Bigfoot for Breakfast, home of the mysterious and the macabre, where we sit in the studio every week challenging conventional thought. We are your lovely hosts, Sarah Jones
and Samantha Carter.
We're really thankful that you have taken some time out of your day to stop by the show and check us out. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new here and return week after week, welcome back. If you have not yet done so, please press the subscribe button on whichever podcast platform you happen to be listening from so that you can be updated every time we put up a new and extremely fascinating story, which is every week.
If, for any reason, you would like to get a hold of us, it's surprisingly easy to do. We're surprisingly available. You would think that we would be wildly popular in our personal lives simply judging by how awesome we are, but alas, we are not.
Nope.
So feel free to email us at bigfootforbreakfast@outlook.com, message us on Facebook or on Twitter, or you can call and leave us a voicemail. If you choose the voicemail route, you can do this at 641-891-2635, and we will play it on our next episode.
Speaking of voicemails, we actually have one this week. Did you know that?
I think you mentioned it, but
Yeah.
I didn't hear it.
It's a good one, so we'll go ahead and play that now.
Yes, good show. This is Skip out in Spokane, Washington. I just learned about you looking up stuff on Johnny Gosh. So awesome job you did on that and the whole Franklin thing. And by the way, the black-eyed children got me a little spooked. So anyway, keep it up. You got a new listener. And I do have an episode suggestion. Where I'm at out here by Idaho, there's a story about a gal named Molly Be Damned in the 1918 pandemic. And I won't say anything more, but you should do research. It's a very interesting and cool story on her. And again, it's called Molly Be Damned. Great job. Great show. Thank you very much.
So that was Skip, and we just want to say thank you so much, Skip. We really appreciate hearing from you. We would appreciate hearing from all of you,
right?
Know. Get
Call
on.
us.
Call us.
Jeez, what are you waiting for?
I mean, why would you not?
Jeez.
We're so fun. And you don't even actually have to talk to us, if that's what you're worried about.
You might be worried.
What if they answer and I have to have a conversation with one of them?
That would be terrible.
Hello. I've been waiting for your phone call. Click.
Leave us a message. Come on. You know you want to.
So anyway, we really appreciate you calling us, Skip, and we really appreciate your suggestion. We will look into that as well.
Yep.
Also, I know we've already asked for a lot of favors, but we're just going to throw out one more. If you could please leave us a rating and a review on the podcast platform that you use or on Facebook. We would seriously appreciate that. It really helps out the show a whole bunch, and we love to hear from you guys and what you like about the show or what you think that we could change. Just be nice to us because we have feelings.
We do. Well, I have that one, I guess.
That one feeling.
That one feeling.
It's anger.
No, it's not.
In case you want to know.
I love cats.
Yeah. And then there's the anger.
And then there's the anger. Called RBF, It's Not My Fault. So, on this week's episode.
On to this week's episode, Samantha.
On to this week's episode. Onward and upward.
Onward ho.
Westward ho.
Why are we going west?
All the hoes are west.
Sorry, Western folk, for that offensive comment.
I'm just doing what Snoop Dogg says.
Technically, this is east of us. We're going to West Virginia.
Oh.
Just because it says West Virginia does not mean that it's west of Iowa.
Well, I didn't even know where the story took place when I said that.
Nice
so.
cover. Nice cover.
So, on to this week's episode. Our story of choice came from a listener request again this week, Jared Warren. We thank you for the suggestion and appreciate you listening to the show every week. He tells us frequently how much he loves us. Right, Jared?
Right, Jared?
We do appreciate all of the compliments.
So many compliments from Jared.
Except for when he says that I'm going to be fired and he's going to take my place as the co-host.
He's always trying to hang out with us.
Right?
And be on our podcast.
Well, come hang out with us, but I'm not fired.
I mean, she could be.
It would feel so empty without me.
It would.
So this week we have something interesting for you, but also we must warn you. Dun dun dun! This is also incredibly sad, and it involves children. While we always do our best to remain respectful when it comes to issues like this, we do understand that stories like this are not for everyone, and we wish to give our listeners fair warning. So if this is simply not something that you're up for, now is your chance to back out and just wait for next week's episode. We will understand.
This week's story revolves around a large family and events that changed the lives of all of them early on Christmas Eve of 1945. This is the story of the Sodder family from Fayetteville, West Virginia. The story itself is a very strange one, and there are a lot of different ideas that have been floating around for many, many years as to what exactly happened to them. Now, as per usual, we will tell the story as we know it, going through the different theories as we have heard them. By the end of the whole thing, you can decide for yourself what you think really happened here, but I promise you, it is a complicated situation.
Down the rabbit hole we go.
Indeed.
We can only begin here with Jenny and George Sodder. Jenny was born March 2nd of 1903 in Italy, moving with her family to the United States when she was very young. George was born on November 23rd, 1895, also in Italy, moving to the United States as a teenager. We read that he arrived to the United States via Ellis Island in New York with his brother, who took a boat right back to Sardinia. Young George was left in America all by himself. He started off working on the railroad in Pennsylvania. He carried water and food down the line, feeding the laborers. A few years later, he went on to work as a truck driver in West Virginia, but George was an ambitious guy, and it wasn't long before he bought a truck and started his own trucking company hauling coal around West Virginia. He met and married Jenny, and the couple lived together in Fayetteville, West Virginia, with their 10 children: John, Joseph, Mary Ann, George, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, Betty, and Michael. The kids ranged in age from 23 to age 5 at the time of this incident. The family was middle class and very, very respected in the community.
They were 23 to age 2. I'm sorry. I forgot about one. Like we said earlier, it was Christmas Eve of 1945. And of course, the kids were all up pretty late and really excited for the next day because Santa would be coming in the morning to bring them presents. Their sister, Mary Ann, had already brought the younger children home a few gifts that night from a store where she worked. So they were disappointed when they were instructed to go to sleep late into the evening because they had wanted to stay up to play with their toys. At around 10 p.m., the 5 younger children, Maurice, Martha Lee, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, asked their mother if they could stay up for a little bit longer to play with the gifts that they had gotten. She reluctantly agreed but told the older boys to make sure that they did their chores before they did go to bed.
It sounds like the Sodder house wasn't quite a 2-story house, as the area where the kids' rooms were is often referred to as a 2nd-story attic. It sounds like maybe it was an attic space with 2 separate rooms. The older kids slept in one and the younger kids slept in the other. I could be wrong about this setup, but from the various descriptions, that's what it sounds like. The younger kids that we mentioned earlier stayed up in their room playing. 2 of the older boys, John and George Jr., had already gone to the other room to go to bed. They often helped their father during the days with his coal trucking company, and it was said that they had had a pretty long day, so I'm assuming that they were pretty worn out by this time.
Supposedly, the kids were still up pretty late listening to the radio, waiting to hear the latest news on the location of Santa Claus. There had been no Christmas tree this year because the family didn't feel right putting one up since their oldest brother Joseph couldn't be there due to being deployed by the army. Mary Ann, who was a teenager at the time, had fallen asleep on the couch around midnight.
Just shortly after this, at about 12:30 a.m., the telephone rang. Jenny was awakened by this and got up to answer it. She would later report that the caller was a woman. She could hear music in the background along with laughter. The woman asked for a man by name, someone who didn't live there at the house. So Jenny told the woman that she had the wrong number and hung up the phone, immediately heading back to bed. Before she got back to bed, though, she took notice of the house. She noticed that all of the lights were still burning, and oddly, the curtains were open on the window. So she went through the house and turned off all the lights and pulled the curtains. She checked the doors, like all of us moms do, and it was not locked to do so after finishing their nightly chores. I assumed that since this was noted a few times that she locked the door at this time, but from the different stories that I read, it's unclear whether she did for sure.
While going through the house, she noted that Mary Ann was sleeping on the couch and she didn't hear any noise from upstairs, so she took that to mean that her excited younger children had finally drifted off to sleep in their attic bedroom. It doesn't sound like she went up to check on them because she probably didn't want to wake them up since it was so late. Jenny went on back to her 1st-story bedroom and just started to drift back to sleep when she heard a weird noise. She would later describe the noise to sound something like a ball hitting a roof loudly and then rolling down the incline of the roof before stopping with a thump.
Now, this next part people thought was really weird because Jenny didn't really think much of this noise and went back to sleep. I get the criticism to an extent, but to be really honest, I can't tell you how many times I have heard a weird noise and thought to myself, oh, that was weird, it's probably nothing, or just assumed it was my dog. So we will not partake in any criticism here because I think it's a really common thing to do. It doesn't blatantly sound like there is an intruder, so it could be literally anything.
So let's kind of unpack here. It was Christmas Eve. The kids wanted to stay up. She said that was fine. She went ahead and went to bed. She woke up a little bit later after someone called in the middle of the night asking for somebody who didn't live there. She hung up the phone, checked things out. The doors and curtains were all unlocked and open, and then she hears this weird noise. So a few, uncommon things going on in the night, but nothing too crazy yet. But this was obviously not one of those situations where there was nothing to worry about, because about a half an hour later, Jenny woke up again to her house filling up with smoke. Jenny and George rushed through the house, waking up what children they could by yelling from the bottom of the stairs for them to get out of the house because it was on fire. At some point, Jenny was looking for the source of the smoke, noting that it was coming from George's office as a corner of the room was engulfed in flames near the ceiling. The two oldest boys who were still living in the house, George Jr. and John, slept in the other attic bedroom, remember. Like we said before, there were just the 2 rooms in the upstairs attic. The 5 youngest kids slept in one while the 2 older boys slept in another. George and John were reported to have yelled for the younger children to get out of the house while running toward the stairs. They assumed that the children would follow and go outside. Jenny had also stated that she was unable to get up the stairs and that she stood at the bottom screaming for her children to exit the house because it was on fire.
The family stood outside of the house after they had escaped the flames, and seconds ticked by as they waited for the rest of the kids to come running outside. Those seconds kept ticking, and pretty soon it was a minute or 2. It didn't take long to realize the kids weren't coming, and by this time, the fire was huge. It was too late to go back in after them. They wouldn't be able to get into the house through any of the normal entrances. Frantically, George ran around to some of the windows trying to break them out, but the fire was everywhere and he couldn't get in. Then he had an idea. He would climb up to the 2nd story and break out the windows in the bedroom. He ran to get his ladder that he used for his business. As he quickly ran to the ladder's usual place, he saw something incredibly disheartening. The ladder wasn't there. He quickly looked around the area and around the house to find it, but it wasn't anywhere. It was completely gone.
So, between the phone call, the weird sound, now the fire, the ladder's gone. So, odd things are small, but they're piling up, right? He had to think quickly, so he sprinted over to his truck, the one that he used for his coal hauling business. He hopped in the driver's seat, planning to drive the truck over to the house, parking it directly under the kids' bedroom window so that he could stand up on top of the truck and reach the window enough to crawl inside the house and get the children. But, as he turned the key, no sound came from the engine. Nothing. It didn't start. It was dead. He ran to his second work truck, and guess what? It wouldn't start either. George's business was open just the day before, and from what we read, both trucks were running just fine at that time. So this was definitely an odd coincidence that both trucks weren't operable at just this time. Panic was setting in even more now. Their 5 youngest kids had been in the house while it was going up in flames before their eyes, and there was nothing they could do but watch in horror as the flames grew bigger and the smoke poured from the windows of their home with their babies still inside.
Keep in mind that this was the 1940s. At this time, the family couldn't just jump on one of their cell phones and call the fire department either. It sounds like they did have a home phone, but it was located in the house. More specifically, it was located in the office that seems to have been the first area of the house that was set on fire. The telephones at this time ran on the operator system, where you would pick up the phone and speak to an operator telling them who you would like to reach. The operator would then connect the caller to the intended callee by ringing their phone and hanging up when it was answered. The Sodder's daughter, Mary Ann, ran to a neighbor's house to call for help, but was unable to reach an operator. I don't know if this was very common, not being able to reach an operator, so we can't really comment on whether or not that was one of the odd incidents piling up.
In the meantime, a person who was driving by in a vehicle happened by the fire, and he saw the family standing out in the yard. They told the person what was going on, and the person hurried to a bar down the road to telephone the fire department too. He was also unable to reach an operator. The person left the bar, drove straight into town, stopping at another place. He called again, trying to reach the fire department, and this time he got through. He spoke to the fire chief, Chief Morris, who simply responded with, "We know it."
So, It was about 2 a.m. by the time the fire department was even notified that there was a fire in town, and the fire had started around 1 a.m. Here's another disheartening detail. Fire departments in the 40s also didn't operate the way they do now. Their response time was much longer. The fire chief, who was the only person in the station, was unable to drive the fire truck.
Which does not make any sense to me. Why can't he drive the fire truck? I mean, I know now you have to have at least 2 people, which I imagine you can't run a fire truck without 2 people.
Yeah, you can.
Can you?
Yeah, they're fine. I mean,
But
it's
back
hard,
then, I wonder.
but I don't know.
A lot of running around, probably. But anyway, he said he couldn't drive it.
They didn't have fancy pagers or mass dispatch text messaging. They didn't even have a siren. They had a phone tree. You remember phone trees? We're kind of going to age ourselves a little bit here, but we remember them. If a message needed to go out to a group of people, this is how they would do it back in the day. I remember having one for our basketball team. The first person on the tree would call 2 previously assigned people. Then each of those people would call 2 assigned people. And then those people would call 2 assigned people, and so on until everyone had been reached and had gotten the message. This is how their fire department worked. The phone tree would make its way through the volunteers until enough people showed up at the fire station that they could go to the fire. Unfortunately, it only took about 30 or 40 minutes of pretty intense fire before the Sodders' house was completely gone, along with their 5 kids.
At the time when Chief Morris initially got the call, he was the only one at the station. Obviously, the fire truck takes a few men to run it, so he can't fight the fire by himself. Not only that, but it was Christmas Day now. I'm sure there were even fewer volunteers ready to jump out of bed on Christmas Day than usual. By the time all of this was said and done, and the volunteer firefighters finally arrived at the Sodder house, it was about 8:30 in the morning, a good 7 to 8 hours after the fire started. There was pretty much nothing left of the house, and what was left was still smoldering, even though the fire station was only a mere 2 miles from the Sodder house.
After they got what was left of the fire put out, the fire chief, Chief Morris, went over to George and Jenny Sodder to speak with them. He told them that there were no remains found in what was left of the home. He told them, quote, "They went through it as if with a fine-tooth comb." So that's kind of weird, right? The family was sure that there were 5 children up there in the attic before the fire started. They didn't see any of them come out of the house while they were running around it while the fire was going on. They had to be in there, right? But the chief just told them that no remains were found. It would be pretty baffling.
Not only was it strange for this family to have heard that their children were apparently not inside the home when it went up in flames in the middle of the night, there were also rumors circulating around town within a few days that the fire chief had told some folks that he actually had found remains in the smoldering rubble that morning. No bones, but he had told people that he found an organ, the opposite of what he told the family, and this fact was never reported to the county coroner. So why would he have said this?
Oregon?
Yeah, we get to that.
Okay.
Yeah. That's odd. Because if you're going to find anything, it's going to be bones. It's not going to be the soft tissue.
So a mortician from the nearby town was apparently on site that Christmas morning when the fire department was still there. He also reported having seen an organ, but he also told people that it wasn't human and the organ had not been burned at all or been through a fire. Now, I don't know how you guys work, but that's kind of weird, right? Imagine being a family whose house had just burned down with their children inside and then being told, "Oh yeah, we did find a random organ from an animal, but it's not from this fire." What? What was the organ?
You'll see.
Why would that be there though? Why would there be a random beef kidney or whatever it was? Not really specified, in the smoldering rubble of the fire? How did it get there? I guess he had told them this as some sort of confirmation that it was not from one of their children, but I feel like that would actually cause more questions to arise instead of giving them any kind of answer.
Yeah. The organ had been taken to a county coroner's office where it was found that it really was, in fact, not human flesh.
At this point, George and Jenny Sodder just kind of thought that the entire thing was over. They had actually hired someone to come and bulldoze the rubble, bury it, and fill it with dirt. From there, they had created a memorial at this site for their 5 lost kids, and a death certificate was issued for each one of them a few days later, citing death by suffocation due to smoke inhalation as their cause of death.
While it seemed that the Sodders initially had accepted the fact that their children had died in the fire and that their remains had likely been incinerated there was just so many things about that night and about the findings that didn't seem right, and they couldn't shake it.
Remember how we said that the chief claimed to have found an organ in the fire?
I can't stop going back to the organ.
Apparently, he not only said this, but when other people questioned this, he went on to tell them that he had actually put the organ there while they were looking through the rubble. They hadn't found anything, and the family insisted that the children had been there. So he put a beef liver in the remains of the home in order to satisfy them. Who does that?
Seriously.
What?
I don't know if I mentioned this at any point, but I did read that he had told them that he found the heart of one of their children, but it was actually a beef liver. He just didn't think they would know the difference.
Where did he get it?
Well, I don't know.
Did he just bring it with him?
He had to have.
I've got something in my front pocket for
I'll
you.
just leave this here.
It's a piece of cow liver.
Just seems so, like, it's just an odd thing to do, you know?
Where did he get it?
I imagine from a beef.
I mean, who just brings that with them to a fire?
It wasn't decomposed.
Was it dinner?
You know, it could have been from the fridge. That's really not less weird, but yeah, it's less weird. Slightly less weird. When the family had heard this, obviously, this not only weirded them out, but it also made them question why the fire chief would do this, just like we are right now.
Who is this guy?
Was he appeasing them, or was he covering something up?
Dun dun dun.
Not only this, but they had kind of been asking around already as to what would have happened to the remains of their children in a fire such as this. Jenny had read a news article in the newspaper about another fire in which 7 people had been killed. The fire had burned for a long time as well, and every one of their skeletons had been found. It sparked an interest because if this was so, why would no trace of her 5 kids been found in their fire? Nothing at all. That just seems odd. And I can't disagree with her. Nothing. Does that happen? You've done the fire thing.
I've never found a body.
There's never been a fatality.
No.
That's good. Good work, fire.
Right. That's what I do. I'm just kidding. So not only this, but Jenny recalled that as she was looking over the site, seeing what was left from inside the house, she found many items from the home still intact. So how would all of these things have not melted or been disintegrated, but there was nothing left of the bodies of 5 children?
She took the time to stop in at her local crematorium to inquire about the burning process when it comes to a body. They told Jenny that they would burn a fire for about 2 hours when cremating a body, and the incinerator is about 1100 degrees Celsius, and this is about 2012 degrees Fahrenheit. But even after this, there's often still bone intact. The bone that remains then gets ground up and added to the ash. The Sodder house did smolder for hours, but it really only burned for reportedly about 1 hour, and the temperature was much lower than that of an incinerator used by a crematorium.
So I had a thought about this as well when we first read the story. You hear of remains being found all the time in fires. Although it's always possible, it's not really that common to find nothing if someone had been in the house and perished. Typically, at least some evidence of them will present itself. The more people that they talked to about this, the more they thought it strange that nothing was found. They were sure that their children had been in the house that night, but this made them question whether they had still been there when the fire actually started. Maybe they weren't in the house at all.
But why would the kids have not been home when their mom had seen them just before she went to bed at 10 p.m.? Where could 5 young kids possibly have gone? George and Jenny Sodder soon developed their own beliefs about this. They came to believe that the kids were definitely not in the house when the fire started. They believed that they had been taken.
That seems unlikely, right? No, it doesn't. It really doesn't.
No.
Well, that's what they were being told by authorities, that their kids perished in the fire, and that's that. Many people had their theories here as to why the kids were not likely taken and had been in the home, and I agree with these. The fact that there were no remains found could either be chalked up to incredibly high temperatures in this particular house fire or shoddy investigating, which is fair, apparently, since they're just leaving behind cow livers.
I got to thinking about this later, and it's like, well, either they just were that bad at their job, because they're volunteers. It's the 40s. Training probably wasn't impeccable at that point. I guess I don't know. But also, this whole group of volunteers, it's Christmas Day. Did they just want to hurry up and get through it so they could get back to Christmas? You don't know this group of people. Were they just rushing it and thought, well, we'll just throw this liver in there and say, oh, that's it. We figured it out. So I don't know.
It's possible.
But when you put all the pieces of the puzzle together, the fact that no remains were found and the strange phone call received by Jenny Sodder at around 12:30, the odd sound that she heard like something rolling across the roof just before the fire started, the missing ladder from the house, the fact that both of George Sodder's previously operable trucks wouldn't start, their inability to get through to the fire station by telephone, telephone. All of these things added up do seem inconceivably coincidental, but it still could be coincidental if there weren't more.
Do we believe at coincidence here at Bigfoot for Breakfast?
Like that many of them? Ner.
That's a ner from me.
Oh, and then, like I said, there's more. Just wait.
Several more oddities surrounding the circumstances of the fire began to emerge with the Sodders' growing suspicion. The more George and Jenny Sodder thought about some little things leading up to that night and during and after the fire, the more they seemed to think they were putting together a very strange puzzle.
George recalled speaking to an insurance salesman not long before the fire who wanted to sell him life insurance. George wasn't really interested and he blew the guy off. The insurance salesman had become angry, hastily yelling at George as though he didn't care about his family. The man yelled, "Your house will go up in smoke and your children are going to be destroyed." Well, I do believe that is a pretty weird thing to say, even in the heat of an argument about life insurance. That would definitely have stood out to me if those events had indeed transpired like in this case. Shortly after a conversation like that, the insurance salesman, who was also an Italian man, also made a comment about George's political views regarding Italy and something along the lines of, quote, "You're going to be paid back for all of those things you said against Mussolini."
What?
Right?
George also had a conversation with a handyman who had been looking for work in the area. He had taken a look at the Sodder home and told them that a faulty fuse box would cause a fire. George denied this, stating that he had just had all of the wiring updated in the home and he sent the handyman packing. This did make George kind of nervous though, so he called up an electrical inspector to come check things out. And George's house was given the okay, and he was told that all was well with the electrical work in the home. I'm not sure how long before the fire that this actually happened, just that it was reported.
Before George bulldozed the rest of the house, there was apparently some sort of half-ass inspection of the place to try to determine the cause of the fire, and the inspector had ruled that faulty wiring was the culprit. George and Jenny disagreed with this many times, stating that they remembered seeing lights on in the home and the Christmas lights still burning bright after the house was in flames. They figured that if the wiring had been the problem and that the fire started there, it would cut the lights. I'm not a house electrician, so I don't know if this is right or if electricity was run differently in the 50s. I'm guessing it likely was. I'm not completely sure that if a fire started due to electricity in one area of the house, if it would cut off all of it or not. If any listeners want to weigh in here, let us know what you think. Isn't Sean an electrician?
Yes.
Sean,
You
you do the electric stuff.
Can I message Sean real quick?
Yeah, we're going to message Sean.
You're listening to the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, home to hundreds of hours of free podcast entertainment. The shows on this network all have a common goal, providing you with the best discussions about movies and other forms of entertainment media. The PFPN hopes to fill your earholes with audio joy. Visit our website with links to all the other amazing shows at www.thepfpn.com. Thanks for listening.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and call in some expert advice
Phone a friend.
on this matter. Phone a friend. And we're going to call in the Attitude Podcast Network. So we've got the Kiwi guys, we've got MWP, and Sean from the Kiwi guys is actually an industrial electrician. So he'll be able to weigh in on this, right? Give us some sage advice.
I've seen some of the Snapchats of some of the, circuits that he works on, and there's some pretty, I'd say they're significantly more advanced than a 1940s house.
So he'll know.
But surely he'll know.
He's got that.
Sean.
Sean, help us. We don't know.
Help us.
We're stupid.
We are not smart.
We don't know the electric workings.
We die by electric. You remember that time I stepped out of a hot tub and got electrocuted?
Yeah, that was hilarious.
That was horrible. I was wet and I couldn't move. And I was just sitting there getting electrocuted. Everybody's like, "Why are you standing there?" And I'm just standing there getting electrocuted and I can't say shit.
I can't say shit. There ain't shit I can say about it.
I might have peed in the pool. No, I'm just kidding. I really didn't.
You know you
That
did.
would have been funny. I just peed.
So we've got Sean from the Kiwi guys. He is an electrician, the Question Everything guys. And so Sam's going to message Sean and ask him if in the 1940s, if a fire started in one part of the house due to electricity, would it immediately cut all the power in the house? Or would it be possible for the lights to stay on for a while?
Sean, we have an electrical question for you. In the 1940s or any time thereafter, if there was an electrical fire in the house and the house was burning down, would the power be cut off to the whole house or just specifically in that area or what? Inquiring minds need to know, like right now.
You're up.
They would kill the main power, first of all, so it would be for the whole house.
That's Sean from the Question Everything guys.
Y'all just probably need to get out of there. I mean, honestly, that's all you really need to do.
Thank you, Chris, MWP.
From NWP Podcast.
And Chach Rock.
Well, it depends on how many circuits there are in the house, how many circuits are going in the breaker, but if it's centralized to one specific location, it would probably just kill it to that one area, unless the fire was by the panels. But if it was like in a room, like on the other side of the house, away from the panel, it would just kill the electricity to that specific part of the house.
Oh, we got a response from Mick from the Question Everything guys. Okay.
Yeah, my grandma used to tell me stories like back in the 20s and 30s. I think 30s is when they had their first light bulb. Like, they had one light bulb in the house. So by the 40s, would they have like a light bulb and maybe 2 light bulbs? How the hell did that ever start a house fire?
Well, you're from Louisiana, so...
Thank
no,
you.
I'm just kidding. Thank you, Mick.
Thank you for that. This is what we get.
Okay.
Y'all should just get out of there, he said.
Oh, Chach.
Thanks, guys. Y'all are awesome.
Attitude Podcast Network.
Yeah.
Network of... I can't even say expert advice, because y'all should really just get out of there.
John's advice was sage-ish.
Hold on.
It was like, hey, little Johnny, did you turn off the one light bulb we have in the house? Because, you know, it could burn this bitch to the ground. Little John be like, yeah, turn it off. But you know that didn't turn it off. And next thing you know, woof, y'all flew up in flames. Because everything was made out of paper mache and gasoline.
I love the Mick. I'm not even kidding.
Thanks.
Okay. This conversation has gone way off the rails.
Here's Sean again.
Nick, how much have you had to drink tonight?
That's fair.
Right?
Pot roast.
So we really just wanted to know about the electric, but we also got some entertainment in return, which is always great.
So the odds are it didn't cut the power to the whole house.
I mean, really, if it sounds like if it started in a corner, it wouldn't be that weird for some of the power to still be on for a while.
Which it was.
Yeah. But they were thinking it couldn't have been electrical because some of the lights were still on while the fire was burning.
So that might be a wrong assumption. But
That's what
it's
it
the
sounds
1940s, so who knows?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know. I mean, it sounds like it would be reasonable to think that maybe some of the power would have still been on. I think they were mostly thinking about the Christmas lights. The Christmas lights kept burning while the house was in flames. But if it was on a different circuit, like Sean said, maybe that's why.
During this investigation of the remains of the house after the fire, a telephone repairman was present and he noticed that there was a phone line that appeared to have been cut deliberately. He stated that the wire had been cut, not that it had been burned in half. Why would there be a cut phone line here in the midst of all of this weirdness? And how would people just write something like that off?
Or like the numerous other things that have happened. And people are like,
investigation is inconclusive. Here's your cause of death for your 5 children whose bodies are unaccounted for.
Right, that's what happened.
What?
They're like, it's Christmas, dude. We gotta go. Obviously, George also speculated that someone likely deliberately disabled both of his work trucks as well. It is stated that both of the trucks had been working just fine the day before this. Everything had been normal. What are the odds at this particular time both trucks would just not start for no reason? I can see why he would think this to be odd. Because it is.
Yeah, it is.
People think we're just crazy conspiracy theorists, but then you look at these things and it's like, well, yeah.
Like, how is this not odd? Also, remember that George went to get his ladder so that he could lean it against the house and reach the window of the bedroom in which his kids were sleeping? He always put it in the same place, and oddly this time, it was just gone. What are the odds of that, too? And to add to this issue with the ladder, if you're wondering if they ever did figure out where it was, they did. They later found the ladder looking as though it had been tossed into a large embankment near the house where George would never have thought to check.
Remember that Jenny Sodder went to bed around 10 p.m., woke about 12:30, and then was awakened again about a half an hour later by the sound of something rolling on the roof and then a weird thud? She had really thought nothing of it at the time and went back to sleep. And I can't even blame her for this. Even after the fire and time had gone by, she really still hadn't thought about that small incident or that it might have any connection to what happened that night. But after the case began to gain momentum in the media, a man driving a bus came forward and stated that he had been by the Sodder house late that evening, and he saw a few people outside throwing, quote, balls of fire at the residence.
Why wouldn't you stop?
Yeah, why wouldn't you stop or call it in?
What are you doing, people?
I know, people
Quit throwing balls of fire at that house.
People seem so nonchalant about these things.
A few months later, the youngest of the Sodder children, Sylvia, who was 2 years old at the time. So where was she?
Oh, Sylvia? She was sleeping with her mom and dad.
Okay.
And so they grabbed her and took her out.
We didn't specify that.
No, we didn't, but that's where she was.
So she was playing outside at the site when she showed her parents a green rubber ball that she had found. George recognized it immediately. He stated that it was a pineapple bomb. I had never heard of a pineapple bomb before, so I took it straight to the Google.
Straight to the Google.
Worth a Google. Apparently, Google thinks I'm a giant alcoholic because I had to sift through 1,758 recipes for the pineapple bomb drink in order to find out that a pineapple bomb isn't actually a bomb, but a firework. And that's pretty much all of the information that I could find on those. But apparently, George recognized it as that, and I have no reason to dispute that because I have no idea what a pineapple bomb is or what one would look like.
Apparently, it looks like a green rubber ball. They were used in World War II for something, but I don't know what. And then pretty much they were fireworks also in the States. So should we ask the Attitude Podcast Network?
I don't think we should.
They're in a mood.
When I Googled pineapple bomb World War II, it popped up as a pineapple grenade.
Okay.
The MK2 grenade.
So it sounds like more than a firework.
So a green ball for a 2-year-old a grenade.
Yeah.
But a grenade.
Because that's not a rolling sound and a thud starting a fire. That'd be like an explosion.
It's an explosion.
Right. So I was assuming it was like a firework. You know what? Some of those ones that just smoke and sizzle.
But I could see
and they don't
why,
actually.
If you look at the grenades, pineapple.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But that would explode. That doesn't make any sense. That it would be that. I was thinking when it said firework that it was just one of those ones that just kind of light on fire. And the ones that just sizzle around and stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's what started the fire. So she might not have heard that happening. She would have heard a bomb. So I don't know. I don't know about that.
They are banned pyrotechnics, it looks like.
Okay.
For fireworks.
Yeah, a grenade surely would be.
Well, as a firework.
Oh, you mean the pineapple bomb, the actual fireworks?
Yes.
They're illegal everywhere. Okay. So anyway, some of the children also remembered often seeing an odd van that they didn't typically see in the area several times parked on Highway 21 in Fayetteville, just down the road from the Sodder house. The driver always seemed to be watching the kids as they walked home from school.
One woman came forward to police stating that she had witnessed the start of the fire and saw a car driving away from the home with the Sodder children in it. Of course, she couldn't prove this, so she was dismissed pretty quickly, it seems.
A waitress in a diner/tourist shop that was located about 50 miles west of Fayetteville near Charleston, West Virginia, came forward as well. She claimed to have seen the kids all together with a few adults eating breakfast. She recognized them after seeing their photos in the paper. She doesn't seem to have spoken to them, but reported that she had seen them just the same. She reported that she had also noticed a car in the parking lot that had Florida license plates. I'm not sure if she said that she knew that that was the car that the children had left in, or if she just noticed this car. This sighting took place the day after the fire.
In my opinion, though, the strangest thing was that a woman who worked for a local hotel had heard about the fire and the missing children. She stated that she had actually seen those 5 kids in her hotel. The kids were in the presence of 2 men and 2 women, all of Italian descent. They stayed the night at the hotel, registering for a room about midnight. She remembered that they booked a suite with several beds. She stated that she acknowledged the children and began talking to them when she noticed one of the adults was looking at her angrily. The adult then turned and spoke to the children in Italian. None of the kids ever answered her, and the adults quickly hurried them off to their room. She didn't see them again and decided to report this after seeing the children's photo in the newspaper and recognizing them. She distinctly remembered the interaction because of how upset the adults seemed to get when she spoke to the children. This sighting took place about a week after the fire, and they left early the next morning, only staying there to sleep a few hours.
Some people on the interwebs really question this interaction, and it seems like this has a lot to do with the fact that it seems less believable that the children, being of Italian origin since both of their parents were Italian, would be kidnapped by other Italian people in America. That's what people are reasoning. Why that's unlikely, but I don't get it. And the fact that the kids understood Italian. But I guess I don't really find that to be so unbelievable since, like we said, both parents were from Italy. and their parents most likely spoke Italian as their primary language. So I'm guessing that George and Jenny did as well, and I don't think it's too much of a stretch to think that the children likely spoke both English and Italian. Also, from what I can read, Fayetteville did have a pretty large Italian population.
There was a lot of speculation that rose from this sighting. One of the dominant rumors going around was that the kids were taken by the Italian mafia due to the fact that their father, George Sodder, was a very, very vocal guy when it came to politics in Italy. He would openly speak out around town against the Italian leader Benito Mussolini, and it sounds like this ticked a lot of people off within the Italian community, especially some of the more prominent members. Political tension was high all over the world during this time due to World War II, and this Italian community was no exception. It wasn't unusual to see him in a heated political debate with people around town. He was very outspoken about his feelings regarding the Italian leader, and not a lot of people appreciated that, and some really took it to heart.
2 years after the fire, George and Jenny sent a letter to the FBI asking for their help in finding out what happened to their children, for sure, and they received a reply back from the office of J. Edgar Hoover. The letter stated the following, quote, "Although I would like to be of service, the matter related appears to be more of local character and does not come within the investigative jurisdiction of this bureau." The letter went on to say that they would be willing to help out with the investigation, but that they needed the investigating officials who were already on the case to ask them to join in on the investigation. When approached about this by the Sodders, the Fayetteville police denied assistance from the FBI.
George and Jenny Sodder decided to go another route. They hired a private investigator by the name of C.C. Tinsley to help them, and he dug up a few strange clues himself. Remember the insurance salesman who got super mad at George when he didn't want to buy his life insurance? The one who claimed that his children would be destroyed when his house burnt down? And then it did? Well, he was one of the investigators for the fire department who ruled the fire to be due to faulty wiring, even though the Sodders were sure that this was not the case. He was also the one who asked around town and discovered that Fire Chief Morris was the one who hid the random cow liver in the rubble, dug it up, and claimed it to be the heart of one of the children. Again, we return to the question, why would Chief Morris have done this? He had admitted that he had just done it to appease the family into accepting that their children had died in the fire. But why? Did he seriously just not want to mess with investigating due to pure laziness? Or was there something more that he was hiding? We talked about the rumors around town that the Italian mob or someone like that had been involved in the taking of the children and burning down of the Sodder home. There was also rumors that the police and the fire chief were in the pocket of said mafia, and he did this to stop further investigation to help them out.
The Sodders were so convinced that their children had been taken and that they were still alive that George even made a long trip to New York City after seeing a photo in a newspaper of a group of school children there. One of the girls looked just like his daughter Betty. He was so sure that it was her that he resolved to go straight to NYC to get her. He arrived there only to find that this young girl was not his daughter, and he was promptly sent away by the girl's father. What a long, heartbreaking drive home. I can't imagine what this family was going through, having lost 5 children and dealing with all of the confusion surrounding it.
4 years after the fire, George and Jenny Sodder hired a man named Oscar B. Hunter Jr. to excavate the site to see what he could find. Hunter was a pathologist from Washington, D.C. with a very good reputation. Upon excavation, Hunter did find something, some bone. Finally, maybe some answers here. It was 4 pieces of vertebrae, and it was definitely human. The vertebrae were immediately sent to the Smithsonian for testing. The Smithsonian. And they disappeared.
They promptly disappeared.
When the results came back for the bone, get this, it was human. It did not, however, belong to any of the Sodder children.
It was just random bone.
It was from a much older person than any of the missing children. And another thing, the bones recovered had not been burned at all, never even been in a fire. So how did random people bones end up here after the fact? Apparently, somehow they later found out that the bones had been dug up from the local cemetery and planted at the site of the Sodder house fire. There was also other speculation that when George moved dirt in to bury the rubble and create a memorial for his children, perhaps the other bones had been in the load of dirt, which does make sense But why does it seem like no one was very curious about who this other random bone belonged to? This could be a whole other mystery, I guess.
It seems like the people involved are just not asking enough questions about these things. The people on the internet, though, however, are. The fact that another investigation had occurred and had turned up new evidence of sorts, and the fact that the Smithsonian had gotten involved, prompted the officials in Charleston to hold a couple of hearings that involved the governor, Okie L. Patterson, and the state's police superintendent. By the end of the hearing, the men told the Sodders that they might as well quit their search because it was hopeless. They closed the case then and there. The Sodders were likely pretty downtrodden by this, but it seemed to have just made them angrier, because directly after this, they erected what seems to be a pretty big billboard along Route 16 outside of Fayetteville. It had all 5 of the missing children's photos on it, along with their age, name, and other small details about each of them. It also has a little bit written on it about what they think happened to their kids.
They went on to also post ads in the newspaper and hand out flyers about the children and offered a $5,000 reward, which later turned into $10,000 reward for any information that would lead them to their missing kids. Of course, leads came in due to the reward money. People would call claiming that they knew where the kids were or that they had overheard someone talking about the kids and what happened to them. George went and investigated each and every one of them, no matter the distance, always coming back empty-handed.
The community was also just as devastated by the loss of these kids. Obviously, many people within the community stood behind the Sodders, and they didn't want to believe that the children perished in the fire either. The fire department was under a lot of scrutiny when they didn't find the remains of these children at all. There was tons of speculation. Some people thought that they were kidnapped and sold into child slavery or trafficking. We talked earlier about the possibility that the kids were taken as punishment for George Sodder's outspoken nature regarding his political views. Maybe they were kidnapped and the fire was only started to cover up a crime.
Some people obviously question why, if they had been kidnapped and were still alive, would they have not gotten in contact with their families after they grew up? We're not really sure what happened to the Sodder children, or really what we even think happened to them. But if this were the case, and they had been kidnapped into child trafficking, I would imagine it to be similar to a Johnny Gosch situation. We did an episode or 3 on Johnny Gosch a few months back. And if you haven't done so yet, you should definitely check them out. It's a crazy story and it's very sad. A lot of people thought that Johnny never really came back to his mother because all of his life since he had been taken, he was told that if he did, she would be killed. So he always thought it was better to stay away from his family. I wonder if the Sodder children are still alive if it was a situation similar to this one.
22 years after the fire in 1967, Jenny received an envelope in the mail. Upon opening it, she noted just one item. It was a photo of a man. Kinda weird, right? But Jenny recognized him immediately as being her son, Louis. She turned the photo over to reveal writing on the back. It simply said, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Ileal boys, A90132. This message was a little confusing because Louis had no brother, Frankie. I did look at both photos, as anyone can do on the internet, and I have to agree that there are some striking resemblances.
So in order to follow up on this lead, since they didn't know where it came from, they hired a second private investigator to figure it out. They sent him to Kentucky since this is where the postmark said it came from. They gave him some money and then never heard anything back from him. It sounds like he pretty much took their cash and made a run for it, which is pretty freaking terrible. Or maybe he was murdered. Who knows?
Only 1 year after receiving the photo, George Sodder passed away. Jenny took to full-blown mourning, it seems. It's said that she put up a fence around her entire house after George died and added onto her house continuously, room after room, in order to put more distance between herself and the outside world. She had only worn black since the fire, and did so until the day of her death 21 years after her husband's. They took her billboard down after she passed. It had stood on the side of the highway for 40 years.
So both parents died, not being sure what happened to their kids. They died feeling like they were sure for years that their children were likely still alive and had been stolen from them, but no one would believe them or listen to them.
So there's all the things leading up to the fire. There's all the things that happened that night. There's all the things that happened afterwards as far as the sightings go. And these are the things that made the Sodders suspicious. But then, people from in town or the investigating officials, they had just kind of an answer for everything. Even the photo, she put up the billboard and she was offering rewards. So of course that's why she was getting tips. And the photo, basically, they just thought that someone was messing with her. Okay, so that's all we have for you this week on Bigfoot for Breakfast. Thank you for checking out our episode, and we hope you come back again next week for another weird story, because we have them lined up like crazy for you. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button on whichever podcast platform that you listen from, and especially don't forget to leave us a rating and a review, because it really helps out the show a whole bunch, and we really appreciate hearing from you guys. If you know of anyone who would enjoy the show, please let them know about us. Word of mouth is a great way to get the word out about a podcast, so tell everyone.
Also tweet us.
And you can tweet us.
Totally tweet us.
What is it called? Like retweeting? You can retweet us?
Retweet our tweets?
I don't know how to
share us.
Twit.
A lot of people on Twitter are asking for recommendations. Give them recommendations.
Yeah, do that.
And tag us in it.
If for some reason you wish to contact us, you can leave us a message on Facebook or Twitter. You can email us at bigfootforbreakfast@outlook.com, or you can always give us a call and leave a voicemail at 641-856-2635, and we'll play it on the air. Thanks again for listening, and until next week, adios.
Come at me, bro.